White Russian. I'm super excited about my new guest. His name is Shane Gross. He is a marine conservation photojournalist. Hi, Shane.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very thrilled you found time to talk today.
Me too. I'm scared for your hardball questions, but I'm excited to be here otherwise.
You grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan. The city is 1,600 kilometers away from the Pacific Ocean and 3,500 kilometers away from the Atlantic, or about that. So your choice of occupation cannot be more exotic. How did you start doing what you're doing?
Well, for me, it started with, as a kid, my dad was a scuba diver and would have scuba diving magazines and documentaries. Back then it was VHS tapes laying around all the time. And I took an interest in it right from childhood. I was really into sharks. I was definitely a shark nerd as a kid and would just seek out anything that had to do with sharks. And then once I was old enough to start traveling a little bit, I would go on trips to see certain animals or certain sharks or just to be in the ocean. And then in 2011, an opportunity came along to move to the Bahamas. And so I became a dive instructor and started diving daily pretty much, and started to get deeper into photography, and it just sort of took off from there. It wasn't I didn't set out to be like, okay, I'm going to be a professional underwater photographer. It was more like, I just want to be in the ocean. I love taking pictures. And then I started to realize that, oh, these pictures have value and I can start to sell these pictures and maybe even someday make a living out of it. And so for the last 2 years or so, that's been my sole source of income. It's just selling pictures and working with conservation organizations to use those pictures and put them to hopefully good use, so I can make a living and help with the conservation of our oceans.
That's a cool story. Do you remember your first dive?
I do, yes. It was in the Bahamas. It was a family vacation. I was 15 years old. And I remember there was this tiny little Nassau grouper. Oh, I don't know if you can see my fingers. There we go.
Yes.
Anyway, it was about, maybe a foot long or so, this little Nassau grouper. And it was really curious about me. And so the instructor wanted us to complete these skills. Like, you have to show that you can do neutral buoyancy. You have to take the regulator out of your mouth and put it back in, those kinds of things. But there was this cute little grouper right there, and it would let me tickle its chin. And it was so curious that the instructor started to get angry with me that I wasn't paying enough attention to the skills because I was so distracted by this little fish. So yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget that dive. That was a really, and since then, that hasn't really happened to me, like finding a fish that's that curious. It's not like I had food or anything. It was just genuinely that curious about me and what I was. And I was just as curious about him, so I couldn't pay attention to my skills. But yeah, it was a very memorable, fun dive, and I felt very relaxed and at home under the water. And I had grown up snorkeling and was in the water a lot, so I think that helped a lot too.
A lot of people are afraid of water, let alone diving. What would you tell them that could help them get rid of this fear?
As a dive instructor, I've taught some of those people. They come and they say, I want to face my fear. I had a near drowning incident as a child, and I want to get over that. Will you teach me how to scuba dive? And it's good to know that as an instructor going in. But it's really just about taking it slow. Go in a pool first. Go with an instructor that you trust and has patience. If you can, get in a very small group. Just maybe one-on-one, just you and the instructor, so you don't feel pressure from other students. And, start off in water that you can stand in, and then, slowly put your face in, and then you can pop right back up if you're uncomfortable. And then maybe the next time you go a little bit longer and pop up, and then a little bit longer. And soon enough, you're going to realize that, oh, everything's okay. I'm okay. The water isn't out to get me. and just go slow and ease yourself into it and slowly progress along. And if that's what you want, I mean, some people might not be interested in that, and that's fine too. But if you are wanting to get into scuba diving or snorkeling or swimming or something and you're afraid of the water, just take it slow at first and go with somebody that you trust.
Have there been many situations when you felt like you were under threat, or that you're gonna basically die while being underwater?
No, I mean, there were moments where I was like slightly uncomfortable, but I knew that it would be okay. I just had to calm my own nerves. For example, I was on a dive in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, with bull sharks. Bull sharks have kind of this nasty reputation as like the most aggressive shark, and statistically they bite the most amount of people out of any of the sharks. So they're definitely a shark that you need to respect. You don't want to take them for granted. They are big, powerful sharks, and they do have big teeth, and they can inflict damage. Usually they don't, but it's possible. So I was on this dive. It was pretty deep. It was about 80 feet, and there was a relatively strong current, and we were just kneeling on the bottom, and the sharks got really excited. So excited that their tails lifted the sand off the bottom to the point where there was no visibility. And one of the great rules of shark diving is that you want to maintain eye contact with the shark, because most sharks are hunting dead, dying fish. They're not hunting healthy animals, or they're surprise ambush predators. So if you're looking healthy and you're making eye contact with the shark, generally speaking, that shark is not going to even try to hunt you. But in a zero visibility situation with sharks that are really amped up, it's possible that a shark could make a mistake and accidentally bite you. It's not hunting you, but they're excited and there's no visibility, and they might be just kind of chomping in mid-water or at anything that touches their nose. So when that happened, it was just a matter of staying calm, not moving too much, and waiting. I knew there was a strong current, and that would move the stirred up sand away relatively quickly. But just stayed calm, waited for the visibility to come back, and then everything was okay. Other than that, it's usually not animals that would scare me. It's more my own negligence, or if I make a mistake. So if I get really, really lost on a dive site or something like that, especially at night, if I'm diving solo at night and I get lost on the dive site, it makes me nervous. I still know everything's going to be okay because I can always go up. But there's passing boats, and swimming on the surface is not as efficient as swimming underwater. So I don't like that feeling of being lost underwater. But yeah, I mean, the more you do anything, the better you get at it. And, I have close to 4,000 dives, and I feel fairly confident. Not that weird things can't happen, but I'm a very careful, cautious person in general. I've never broken a bone. I've only had stitches once. I'm a very careful, cautious person. And I try to carry that over into being in the water as well, because, we're not meant to be there. We're using life support equipment. We can't breathe underwater. So you need to be extra cautious.
Speaking about breathing, according to your personal webpage, you can hold breath for more than 4 minutes, and that's quite impressive. How did you build that up?
It was just like I didn't set out to have that as a goal or anything. It just sort of, I was just freediving a lot. Even here in Regina, we have a lake an hour north where my parents and grandparents had a cabin, and I'd go out there and just snorkel and just have fun snorkeling and freediving. And then when I moved to the Bahamas, I was freediving a lot. And the more you do it, I guess you adapt. And then one day, I was like, oh, I should time it, just see how long I can hold my breath if I'm if I'm just resting, laying down, calm the heart rate down as much as I can and see how long. And there was a few times I made it over 4 minutes and still felt good. You don't want to push that too much. But I felt really good after that. And if anybody's watching this and wants to see how long they can hold their breath, just don't do it with, in the water. Just I know people who've hurt themselves or died that way practicing. Seeing how long they can hold their breath alone in the water it can be a very dangerous situation. You can pass out and then drown. So just be cautious and careful.
I read that in about 1 or 2 minutes, the natural reaction of a human being is just to get out of water and breathe. So how do you suppress that feeling and force yourself to stay underwater after those 2 minutes?
I don't know I believe that is true, but for me, when you spend so much time in the water, I guess it just sort of naturally overcame for me. I didn't and again, I should point out that when I'm actually in the water and freediving meaning you're actually like kicking from the surface down. When you're freediving, I'm not staying under for 4 minutes because you're exerting energy, and so you're using oxygen up more quickly. And so maybe on a free dive I could stay down like 2 minutes, if and especially when you're trying to do photography, I don't push my own limits. I don't try to stay under as long as I can, although there are moments where it's like, oh man, if I could stay down just another second or two, that fish is going to turn this way or that way, and I need that extra little bit. And sometimes I just have to miss the shot and get back to the surface, because there is a what you call it, condition called shallow water blackout, where you trick so before freediving down, you can take some deep breaths. And if you do too many of those, you can actually trick your brain into thinking you have enough oxygen. So you're hyperventilating on the surface, you free dive down, and you think you have plenty of air. And then on your way back up to the surface, you faint or pass out. And it's possible that you could drown. And that's why we always free dive in pairs, or you have a buddy with you. So if they notice that you have passed out, they can come down and bring you to the surface. Because fainting or passing out is not a serious thing. But if you're underwater, it is, because you could drown. That's why we take our snorkels out of our mouth and close our mouths, so that if you faint, you don't automatically involuntarily inhale water and get water in your lungs. So there's, again, any of these types of things, if anybody's looking to get into this, do it cautiously, do it slowly, do it with a professional if you can, who's going to impart all that knowledge to you, and you'll do it safely. I wouldn't just go get in the ocean and start trying these methods out on your own with no practice.
For sure. You recently went to Antarctica. What did you do there?
Antarctica was an opportunity that came my way. I didn't know that I was going to Antarctica 8 days before I left. So it was a last minute. There was a cabin available on a boat. And I mean, it's always been a dream of mine to go to Antarctica. It's also, for me, the 7th continent, the only one that I hadn't visited yet. So of course I said yes. And I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, obviously. So it was basically take whatever comes. I'm just joining this ship, and I'm going to take photos of whatever I can along the way. And it was spectacular. We got incredibly lucky with the weather. Most days were relatively calm. We got a lot of sun. The animals were just incredible. The further away you go from the poles, the further away you go from the equator towards the poles, the less biodiversity there is. However, there can be massive numbers of animals. So, for example, we went to one beach where they estimate there was 1 million penguins on one beach, 1 million king penguins, not to mention, all the seals that were there. And it was quite overwhelming. In addition to Antarctica, we also went to South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. And on the Falkland Islands, we got to visit a albatross rookery with 100,000 albatross pairs, a lot of them sitting on eggs. And to see that amount of, I mean, these are some of the biggest birds in the world, 7-foot wingspans. It was just overwhelmingly beautiful. And yet that species is not doing well. Longline fishing and other, especially fishing practices are killing these birds. But to still see that many in one place was quite spectacular. So it's a really special place, Antarctica and South Georgia and the Falklands, and I feel really lucky and privileged to have gotten to visit it and to make some pictures. I'm about maybe a third the way through processing those photos. I think I took close to 19,000 pictures in about 23 days. So there's a lot of beauty down there to point your camera at.
For sure, and I am jealous, I'm not gonna lie.
You should be.
In your book, Bahamas Underwater, there are so many stunning photos of yours. Do you remember the photo that was really hard to capture?
I mean, a lot of them were lucky, and you know, the more time you spend, the luckier you get. And because I got to live in the Bahamas for close to 10 years, I got to get those lucky moments that somebody visiting for a week or two just doesn't get. But the first picture that comes to mind that was really difficult and I really had to work hard for was the picture of the 3 seahorses backlit, and there's plankton in the water column, and that's what the seahorses feed on. And it's in a pond on Eleuthera Island that has a lot of seahorses in it. In fact, they estimate it has the highest density of seahorses anywhere in the world. But usually the seahorses are spread out by a meter or two. So even though there's a ton of seahorses, you know, to get 3 together like that is quite rare. So I kept going back to that pond over and over and over the course of literally years. And, you know, once in a while you'd see pairs together, mating pairs, most likely. And then that night, it was at night, I had an idea to try to backlight a single seahorse. And then I saw that there were 3 seahorses together, and, you know, my heart rate was going through the roof because I knew that this was a really special opportunity and it would be very easy to screw that up. So I really had to calm myself down and take my time. And you can also scare the animals into leaving. So I approached very, very slowly. I set my backlight behind them and then backed away and waited for, you know, minutes. And then I slowly got closer. And you can kind of, with a lot of animals, you can kind of see what their boundary is when you're starting to get too close, just in their body language. They're just, oh, they haven't left yet, but they're starting to get ready to leave. If you come any closer, I'm leaving, they're saying. And so I would get to that point, and then I just sit there and wait and wait and wait. And then you'd see them start to relax because they understand you're not a threat. And then you get that little bit closer and they start to, and then you wait there for a few more minutes. And it took quite a while to get close enough to where I could get a picture of them and they were relaxed and they were feeding, which is a sign that the animal is very comfortable. So I never want to disturb the animal for a picture, you know, that's not the point. So yeah, so that was a mix of definitely luck, but also just putting in my time, going back to that same spot over and over and over and spending several hours each time I went over several years to be able to get that picture. Somebody who's going there for a week, you'd have to be incredibly lucky to get a picture like that. So I feel like it's a very special picture, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, you definitely had a lot of patience. And I think in general, your work requires a lot of dedication and passion. And I get it, it's not really about the money, but what would you recommend for others to make living in your line of work?
Well, it's definitely not about the money because there isn't much. Um, you know, the world is so inundated with photos. Everybody's a photographer now. We all have pretty good cameras in our pockets with our phones. And so the value of a photograph has gone way down. So there was kind of a heyday in the 80s and 90s when I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was very possible for a lot of people to make a decent living in photography. Those days are gone. Now you need to be very savvy and have multiple revenue streams coming in from your photos. If you can shoot video, that's a little bit more lucrative. I don't shoot video. I'm a dedicated still photography person, which is detrimental to my bank account, but I just love it so much that I stick with it. But no, if you're looking to get into this now, be prepared to work really hard and not make a lot of money. And so, you know, it sounds like I live a very exciting life. I'm traveling, I'm doing all those things, but in my day-to-day life, I live a very simple life. I have a very modest place that I rent. I drive a very modest vehicle. I don't eat out at restaurants a lot. Like I really have to keep my expenses to a minimum to be able to afford this. The good side of that is I have the complete freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. I don't have a boss that I have to answer to. If I feel like going out and shooting that day, I can go. If an opportunity to go to Antarctica comes up and it's in 8 days and it's, you know, you're going to be gone for 23 days, I don't have to ask for time off work. I can go and do it. So if you're going to get into it, make sure it's for the right reason. You're not going to get rich and famous. You are in it because you love it. You love it. You love the photography side. You love the animals or whatever it is that you're going to photograph. A great way to start, if you can, is going to your local newspaper and just in whatever capacity you can. If it's assisting another photographer or if it's shooting for them or if it's asking, hey, if I go out and get some pictures on my own, can I bring them by and see if you like them and see if maybe you'll run them. Newspaper photographers get really good at being able to shoot anything. And that becomes really, really valuable down the line. I'm very much a niche photographer. My specialty is underwater. I do shoot above water and I do shoot drone, but really, you know, what I'm best at is getting in the water and interacting with animals. That's what I feel I can do better than not anybody else, but I can do that better than most people. Whereas going and shooting, a protest rally, there's a lot of people who could probably shoot that a lot better than I can. And so I'm kind of shy about, saying, hey, I'm the person who should be going and shooting that. And that's a question that gets asked a lot in the photojournalism world is why you? Why should it be you that's going to shoot and not these other 30 or 100 or 5,000 people that are applying for that job? Why should we choose you? What can you bring to the table that nobody else can? And so, another good piece of advice, I think, would be before you get into photography, become an expert as much as you can at something else. So if you are if you can become a pilot and you can shoot aerials, shooting with a DSLR from an airplane or a helicopter, you're going to have higher quality images than a drone. And you can go higher up in the sky, you can get different things than a drone. So that is a skill that is going to lift you above your competition. If you are a scuba diver like me and you have access to the underwater world and you get really comfortable in the water, that's a leg up on other people. If you are living in Hollywood and you have famous friends and you can shoot portraits of them, those pictures are really in demand. Whatever it is that you can do to be different, that's what it's about. You don't want to be taking the same pictures as everybody else. What's your voice? What's your style? What can you say? What do you have to say that other people don't necessarily have. I think that's the key to having a long, successful career in this genre.
I see. Do you think that underwater species will go extinct in the long term, or can humans actually prevent this from happening?
Well, yeah, wow. That's a very difficult, complicated question. I knew you're going to have some difficult ones for me. No, I think that there is hope. You know, I'm hopeful. I do see it starting to change. It's not happening as quickly as we need it to, but we are changing. It seems to me that humans will change when it gets really dire. So, you know, a famous example from Canada was the Atlantic cod fishery in the early 90s collapsed in Newfoundland area. And the cod population was so big, they said you could just throw a basket in the ocean anywhere in that area and pull it out and you'd have a basket full of cod. They were just thick in there. Well, by 1991, they were commercially extinct, and 40,000 people, fishermen, lost their jobs overnight. It took, you know, getting that bad before they finally closed that fishery. And it seems to be that way for a lot of animals. I mean, we hunted whales, most of the great whale species, to the brink of extinction not that long ago. It was only in the 1980s that there was a moratorium on whaling. But a moratorium on whaling did happen. And now some species of whales are rebounding spectacularly. Humpback whales are doing extraordinarily well. Their population is growing. And it's wonderful. There are other species like the North Atlantic right whale that isn't doing so well, even though they're not hunted anymore. They're getting entangled in crab traps and other debris that humans put in the ocean. So their numbers are slowly going down. I think there's less than 400 left, 400 individuals left. So are we going to wake up and start protecting these species? Yes, and I think it's also important to note that we need to look at the whole ecosystem, not just individual species and protecting individual species. But these animals, they need certain habitats. That's why I've spent a lot of the last few years focused on seagrass, because seagrass is this really important ecosystem that sequesters carbon and helps our fight against climate change, provides habitat to juvenile fish species, protects our shoreline, it cleans the water of pollutants. And most people haven't even heard of it. You know, most people don't know what seagrass is. But if we're protecting, let's say, Atlantic cod, but we don't protect seagrass, Atlantic cod won't have that place to hide in their juvenile phase. And it's going to be a lot harder for them to recover. So we need to be protecting large swaths of the ocean and just not touch them. Just no fishing, no oil extraction, just leave them alone. And then the life comes back, and it comes back shockingly quickly. So, you know, there's some targets that are out there protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. If we can do that, we'll have a real chance at long-term success in terms of protecting the ocean and having a healthy enough ocean. I mean, 50% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean. So we're even though, you know, if you're living in Regina, Saskatchewan, the ocean is so far away, it feels so distant, but we still need air to breathe here. So we better protect the ocean as best we can.
So who has the biggest responsibility for reversing the destruction of ocean life? Governments, NGOs, individual citizens?
I think we all have some responsibility. However, it's, you know, the big corporations and the governments have an outsized responsibility. They can make major changes overnight, and trying to get, you know, there was a campaign a few years ago to end plastic straws. which is a great thing. I believe that, the world is a slightly better place now because of that campaign. Does that mean that there's not other much bigger issues out there? There definitely are. And so a lot of people look at that and say, well, why are we, harping so much on plastic straws when we've got climate change and we've got overfishing and all these other much bigger issues? Why shouldn't we focus on that? And I think it's true to some extent. However, it's still progress. And so the individual can make a difference, and we should do what we can. However, we also need to relax a little bit and realize that, we can't do everything. We live in a society that's built in a way that it's impossible to live a perfect life ecologically. We are going to have an impact, all of us. That's just the way our society is built. So we can take a bit of the pressure off of ourselves, I think, but we need to put that pressure then on the big corporations and the governments. I mean, the biggest plastic polluter in the world is the Coca-Cola Corporation. They could change things overnight in a massive way for our plastic pollution problem. And I hope that they are. I've heard some rumors that they are investing a lot of money into plastic alternatives. I hope that that's true. But without those major corporations and without the government support, us individuals, we can do everything correctly, and we're still losing that battle. So, the number one thing I think people can do as individuals is actually vote for politicians that do take this seriously and do want to make change and are sincere about it, and make it the number one issue on the ballot, because it is the number one issue. It's the economy. We're not going to have a good economy if our climate is in dire straits, if we're having fires and droughts and flooding and all these disasters that we're seeing happening more frequently. How are we going to have a good economy if those things keep happening? So to me, that should be the number one issue. And that's something that we as individuals can do.
I have to ask you about sharks, and you talked about them before already. I know you studied them for a very long time, taking countless pictures of them. So you can explain, like nobody else, why we, and by we, I mean most people, shouldn't be afraid of sharks.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that fear. Growing up, Jaws was my favorite movie. There is something about the unknown, and even I get it sometimes if I'm floating, even in a lake where I know there's no sharks or anything. If you're floating and at neck level and you don't know what's beneath you, your mind starts to play tricks on you. It's the same for the fear of the dark. It's because you can't see what's going on. So I understand that fear. And if you were to be bitten or eaten by a shark, that would be a horrific, horrific experience. And so I understand that. The flip side is it doesn't happen very often. So 5 to 10 people are killed by sharks each year. Millions are killed in car collisions. There, more people are killed by coconuts falling off trees or vending machines or toasters. I mean, things that we don't fear are actually more dangerous for us than sharks. And there are millions of people in the ocean all the time. And especially with drones, we're starting to see just how often people are next to sharks and the sharks don't do anything. They just swim by. So they're not out to get us. In fact, the hardest part about photographing a shark is getting close enough to it, because underwater, we can't see very far. It's not like on land where you can have a really big long lens and photograph a bird that's 100 meters away. Underwater, you need to get close in order to make a good picture. And that's really hard because the sharks are really afraid of us. They evolved 400 million years ago. We only evolved a couple million years ago. So for most of sharks' evolution, we didn't even exist yet. So it's not like they evolved to hunt humans. They're not out to get us. Mistakes do happen. Once in a while, people are killed by them, and we can't forget that. We need to treat these sharks with respect. And but we're just not on the menu. I mean, it's so rare for somebody to get bitten or eaten by a shark that we really shouldn't let it get to us. I look at it as an irrational fear, which we have lots of. I have a somewhat fear of spiders, even though I know that they're not out to get me. There's just something about them that doesn't that I don't like for whatever reason. We all have our little things, and yeah, movies like Jaws don't help. Even though I think it's a really amazing movie, it is very much fiction. It is a monster movie. It's not a documentary. It's not based in reality. And the author of Jaws, Peter Benchley, once he learned more about sharks, he said he could never have written that book, knowing what he knows now about sharks, and had spent the rest of his life basically trying to counteract the effects of Jaws and trying to tell people how wonderful they are and how we shouldn't fear them.
Shane, thank you a lot for your responses. I'm going to ask you a round of quick questions, and hopefully you can provide quick answers. Are you ready?
Okay, go.
Ocean or sea?
Ocean.
Rays or sharks?
I do love rays, but I have to go sharks.
Best place to dive?
Oh, Indonesia.
Sea creature most in need of help?
I'm gonna go with sharks.
What profession did you want to have, or if you could, as a kid?
It was a marine biologist. I was very much more on the science side.
Ah, so starting from the early age, that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah.
How often do you see dreams about the ocean?
Frequently. I can't say every night, but I do have, this is going to be a longer answer, I'm sorry, but I do have a lot of dreams where it's like, there's so many ocean animals that it's overwhelming. And for whatever reason, I can't get a picture of it. There's something holding me back. I can't get a picture, but there's so many amazing animals, and it would be impossible in real life, but you're in a dream, so it feels real. But I have dreams like that a lot.
Shane, thank you so much for this interview. I sincerely wish you the best in your important work.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Cheers. This is White Russian. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click on like. There'll be many more interesting interviews coming up very soon, so stay tuned.